We're ready to come to order. There we go. There. Is that better? Great. So with that, we'll call to order the August 2nd, 2017 joint meeting of the Design Review Board and the Cultural Heritage Board for the City of Santa Rosa. Item number 1 is going to be a roll call.
Let the record reflect that all board members are present, except board members Hedgepeth, Succo, and Grogan from the Design Review Board, and Galantine, Fennell, and Murphy from the Cultural Heritage Board.
Thank you. We've got a couple of items ahead of our scheduled item tonight. I'm going to reorder the agenda to stick in as item 2, swearing in of new Cultural Heritage Board member. Who's doing that?
So John, I, John P. McHugh. Is he repeating after me then? Okay.
This technology and stuff has us all messed up, so.
I state your name. Do solemnly swear that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of California against all enemies, foreign and domestic. That I will bear true faith and allegiance to the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of California. That I take this obligation freely, without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion. And that I will well and faithfully discharge the duties upon which I am about to enter. Before this day, the 2nd day of August, 2017, in Santa Rosa, California. Do you agree?
I do.
Thank you. Welcome aboard. Good luck. Item number 2 on the agenda was a study session regarding the city clerk, who is getting the iPads out to the Cultural Heritage Board and Design Review Board members. If you want to brief us.
Let me turn on the microphone. Okay, good afternoon, members. So some of you have not logged into your account, so I think we should start there. So that way you can also navigate while we're going through the slides. I'm gonna go, I brought my iPad because it's easier for me to do it if I'm looking at everything you need to look at. So if you haven't logged into iLegislate, let me show you what it does look like. There, it's a small icon. It has a G for Granicus. So if you can find that and select it, and if it does ask you for your iLegislate user account information, does anyone need help? Okay. I'm going to go back there and help you, okay? Just give me 1 second. So the wonderful thing about this is you'll never have to log in again. Okay, this is a one-time thing. When you close an app, it will never ask you to log in unless you log out, and I won't show you how to do that. So now that we're all logged in, what you want to do, and it'll show you here, is that when you do close your app, you can always just select your app and it'll open it up. That's getting started. Now I noticed that some of you saw your index screen, so that's what I have here on the screen, your agendas. It's going to list every single body that we have generated an agenda for. So you're always looking for your specific meeting body and the date and time, so that you're looking at your agenda. And what I did notice is that some of you had the word join, and we all want to select that join button because it seems like the right thing to do, but we're not using that feature in iLegislate yet. So you're going to see a little bit of a difference if you use that. So what you do is you select the actual body name and not the word join. So you can back out of that and go back in. Otherwise, you're going to see speakers, you're going to see a voting option, you're going to see other things, and we're not using that feature yet. Okay, so your agendas, this is what you're looking at. All the current agendas that you do see in iLegislate will be listed there, and if you scroll further down, so if you just use your finger and swipe and actually swipe up, the older body meetings that you no longer want to have on there, you can edit that and delete it. It will only delete it on your iPad. It will not affect the database at all. This here, that's why you have to log in and you only do it once, is because this is your specific account. And so what you want to do is just select your meeting body and the meeting date, and I just used one that I had at the time when I created this presentation. And so what you want to do is, first thing as soon as your agenda is ready for your body meeting, you want to download it, and what the benefit of downloading it is that you can access your agenda even if you're not connected to Wi-Fi. And the other benefit is that you can retrieve the PDF documents, presentations, and all of that quickly. If you don't download it, it will load and it will take a very long time. It's connecting, it's looking for Wi-Fi. And if you want to just download it immediately so you could always access it, that's the best thing to do, and I'll show you how to do that. Well, actually in this screen here, it tells you by clicking on the little, it looks like an arrow facing down towards the blue box. It's on the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. And if you click on that, and it'll download. So if you select that, It should be downloading, and then once it's done, it takes a little bit, but once it's done, it'll be good. If you ever have an error message, make sure you communicate that to staff. There probably was an issue with one of the PDFs or Word documents and may have been corrupted. Sometimes when we're changing documents in the database, it's not catching up and we're publishing it in the middle of it, and so it'll show an error message. But if you ever find an error message or it gives you that it didn't download, then communicate that to staff. So there it is in the bottom right-hand corner. So if you want to select your item to view the agenda language and the attachments, what you do is you select your actual agenda, and then you scroll down. If you see a paperclip to the right, that means that there's an attachment. And if you're at that particular item, or if you want to go ahead, you can. Again, this is your account, so it doesn't affect anyone else's viewing. And if you select it, you can also type in your notes. And everyone has a keyboard, so you can use that keyboard to type in your notes. And it'll save it for you. And you will always have it here unless you, for some reason, want to delete it. And so that's just a sample of the Word notes that we saved in there. And so if you want to view your PDF or any attachments that are related to the item, then you just click on that PDF. And if you want to have any notes that you want to comment on that PDF, you can write all over it. And we have these nifty little iPens, which I believe I overheard someone already telling you how to use this, where you just, in order for you to utilize this, if you don't use it for a long time, you will disconnect the Bluetooth. And so the way to connect it is just by plugging it to the side. And this is also the way of for you to charge it. And it is magnetic, which is nice, and so is your screen. So if you ever, so you won't lose it. I know you do have an actual placeholder for your iPen, but just in case, if sometimes I'm typing and I can't put it in my case, you can actually put it on the keyboard and it'll stick to the monitor pretty good. I'm trying to open up one of the items so that in case there's something in here that I remember to show you. So if you click on Note at the bottom of the screen, you can go ahead and start typing. And then again, you can change the color, you could delete it, or you could say done and it'll save it. And it's just like using any other comment that you use on your PDF on your desktop. If you want to draw, that means that you're asking to use your iPen and you want that so you can circle in and you can choose your color, you can erase, you can undo, redo. It gives you a lot of options. So there on the top left-hand corner on the sample, it says notes, and that we typed in there or used our iPen. You can highlight, so if you ever want to highlight any item and write a note on there, you can do that as well. And if you want to retrieve your notes all at once, you just select the bottom in your agendas listing. It'll give you an option to view all your notes. And it'll just populate it for every single meeting that you've ever done, so you don't have to select a specific agenda or agenda item. And bookmarking does the same thing. It's just a quick way of referencing back to something that you remembered, maybe that you wanted to save. Yes?
Nobody's pens are working.
Okay, so I don't know if your pen, has it already connected to the side of your...
Go ahead and plug it in.
If you plug it into the side, that's how you connect the Bluetooth.
That's probably it.
And if you don't have any battery life, you won't have any, you won't be able to use it.
That's how they charge.
It's on the right-hand side of your screen.
You should still be able to use your finger.
You can use your finger.
Right.
It's not as clean, but yes, you definitely can. And I've used it at times, yes.
If you want to attach a document for your own reference, can you do that?
No, you cannot attach your own documents, not in this system.
Oh,
Correct. Or you can email it to yourself, but you're not allowed to use, you're not allowed to communicate by email and that kind of thing during a meeting. But you definitely can do that for future reference if you want to have it. And actually, this iPad could do a lot of things, and I wish I could show you it all, but really, what I'm going to show you is just the iLegislate. But if you would like me to show you the different options that you can do, because you can split your screen and view what you've scanned on one side of your screen, and then you can view your agenda on the other, if you wanted to, yeah. Okay, so, and then you can email if you wanted to look at the item again later, or you wanted to have some more research that you wanted to do, you can always email it, but you want to also be careful about not emailing things to each other. There is a Brown Act that you need to be careful not to do any serial meetings or anything like that, and also you don't want to do it during the meeting. And you have access to this before and after. I mean, you always have access to this information here. And if, I think I already referred to this earlier, but in deleting an agenda by tapping on the edit, you can delete it. It'll permanently delete it, but it'll delete it from your account. It will not affect anyone else's account or the database. And it really only allows you to do the really old documents or agendas. It won't allow you to do anything current. Okay, did anyone else have any questions? And again, after the meeting, if you'd like me to show you a little bit more about what you can do in the iPad, I'd be more than happy to.
looks pretty good.
Yeah, it definitely takes practice. But you'll get used to it really
I have
quickly.
a small one, and I tried to write a report on it while I was in England, and I was texting. It was awful. But this is much better.
Yeah.
Didn't have the pen, I didn't have the keyboard, so this is great.
Yeah, there's a lot more options you can do on an iPad Pro than you can on
Oh, yeah.
any other.
I can see that
Yeah,
now.
yeah, because it does work like a real PC, where you can split your screens
Instead of the
and.
small one. Yep, yep. Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions? Yes. Oh, I'll pick that up, thanks.
Great, thank you very much. We'll inundate you with questions probably as we go along. Be ready for us.
Stand by.
We'll move to item 3, board business. This is where we each read the statement of purpose for our board. We'll start with the Design Review Board. Zoning Code Chapter 20-52.030, Project Review. The review authority shall consider the location, design, site plan configuration, and the overall effect of the proposed project upon surrounding properties and the city in general. Review shall be conducted by comparing the proposed project to the general plan, any applicable specific plan, applicable zoning code standards and requirements, consistency of the project within the city's design guidelines, architectural criteria for special areas, and other applicable city requirements, such as city policy statements and development plans.
Just a quick comment. This is not on the iPad, correct? This document that has our statement of purpose?
Yeah, I'm
Because
not sure.
I don't see it, but I would just wanted to comment on that because we do read this each time, and if we're going paperless, we definitely want to have this on the iPad as well. So I'm going to read for the Cultural Heritage Board. The Cultural Heritage Board shall consider the following matters, standards, guidelines, and criteria to the extent applicable in determining whether to grant or to deny a permit, whether the proposed change is consistent or incompatible with the architectural period of the building, whether the proposed change is compatible with the adjacent or nearby landmark structures or preservation district structures, whether the colors, textures, materials, fenestrations, decorative features, and details proposed are consistent with the period and/or compatible with adjacent structures, whether the proposed change destroys or adversely affects an important architectural feature or features. The Secretary of Interior's standards for rehabilitation and guidelines for rehabilitating historic structures, historic buildings, revised in 1983, such other matter, criteria, standards as may be adopted by resolution of the Cultural Heritage Board, Ordinance 2668. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Stacy. Item 4, public comment. Any public comment for items not on the agenda today? Seeing no one, we'll move on to item 5, statements of abstention. Any abstentions on our item 6.1 today? Great, so we'll move on to our scheduled item 6.1, concept design review for the Deterk Winery Village at 806 Donahue Street and 8 West 3rd Street. This is a concept hearing regarding changes to a project that was previously approved, and I'll ask Susie for a quick rundown from staff.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. The project before you is very familiar to most of you, and for those of you that are new on the boards, this is the Deterk Winery Village, which was a project that was approved earlier this year. The design review and landmark alterations were granted to the applicant on appeal back in January, and then the final entitlements were granted in May. Excuse me. This, I want to really put it out there. This is a concept meeting. There are no decisions being made today. The purpose for this is for the boards to weigh in on, within your respective purviews about the project or the proposal. The reason the project is downtown, which is why we're being televised. It's a required concept meeting with both boards because it's in a historic preservation district or a combining district, and it's over 5,000 square feet. The City of Santa Rosa has not received a formal application yet. So staff has done very little analysis. The proposal is to modify that previously approved plan, taking it from 185 residential units to 240 residential units. I'm going to let the applicant's architect, actually, or the applicant team, talk about how those changes will be implemented. But primarily, I think, in terms of what you're looking at, is it's going to affect Building C. Let's see. The original plan included design review, a landmark alteration, vacation of public right-of-way, and a density bonus. Density bonus is really key here because that project was entitled to 2 concessions. One of them was building height, and the other one was parking. So really, if we can focus on the exterior of these buildings and those changes, it'll probably serve us all well. And I think that concludes my comments, and when you're ready, the applicant can come up and kind of address all the changes.
Great, thank you. Questions for staff from the boards?
Susie, is this considered a new project under the definition of?
Yes, because it will require some sort of entitlement, but that has not been clearly defined yet. And when we know the full scope, actually that decision will be made above my head. So I'm not quite sure, because anytime we have a new entitlement, it's a new project. It is a modification, yes, but it'll be treated like a new project, like any modification.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Just a little clarification. Can you get a site plan that actually shows
I thought that was in your building plans, but we have that up here, and I'm going to let the architect, or the applicant talk to you about that. I know, because I caught a glimpse of their preservation earlier today. So,
Just a reminder to everybody, if you could, when you're speaking, turn on your microphone so that the people watching can hear. Thank you.
Any other questions for staff? Okay, so here's what I want to take a minute, having thought through our prior meetings, ample number of meetings and time spent. Most of us are fairly familiar with the project. This being concept design review for a change to this project, what I'd really like to do is see if we can run a really clean meeting here and probably not revisit some of the arduous, difficult parts of the process that we've been through. And I want to be really careful about this. I think that when this item comes back as a public hearing, I'm going to expect that there's a lot of questions we're going to throw out that impact the whole project, and I expect that to be a much longer, much more intensive discussion that breaks open the project again as a whole, because the impact of just what I've seen in this concept drawing is going to impact the whole project. For today, I would really like to focus on the changes that are proposed and give our comments back so that the applicant team can consider the comments and questions and concerns that we have about this change into what would come back as an actionable item for a motion. So what my gut tells me that what I need to do is probably set some ground rules and then try to make everybody live by them. I'd like to have, I think that, if there's any other comments from staff before we start, after I lay the ground rules here, we can do that. I'd like to have the applicant presentation. I'd like to have questions with a capital Q from both boards. We'll go in order to the applicant. It's an opportunity to ask questions back and forth. We don't want to take a deep dive into any particular topic. I want to have both boards then provide their comment in order across the row here. And then at that point, if the applicant has questions of the board, get very directed, focused questions from the applicant team about comments that we've made. Try to wrap this thing up in a couple hours as a concept hearing so that we can provide comment on this piece of what's come back. But I'm sure you're going to hear it. I mean, I'll give you a little insight into my comments. I'm going to ask for a hell of a lot more information and detail about how this change relates to the whole project down the road. So if we keep our comments to this tonight, don't expect that you're off the hook on answering how the impact is on the rest of the project. That's maybe me editorializing as one board member, but there we go. So anything else from staff before the applicant presentation?
No, staff concurs with everything you just laid out. I think this project, it has been in for a while. Both boards have looked at this. We all know the long meetings that we've sat through. Certainly there may be some questions and comments that come up as it relates to the larger project, but we would just encourage you to try to stay focused on the delta, what has changed from what has been approved, what is here before us tonight. This project will be coming back as a new entitlement, which means a new public hearing, new public noticing, and at that time, everything will get fully discussed. So I would say, make your comments, your questions tonight, but if we can try to focus on the delta, I think that'll be a most efficient meeting for everybody.
Great, thanks, Bill. And I wanted to throw in that I am going to ask, although it's not a public hearing, I am going to ask for comment from the public after the applicant's presentation before we move to questions. So, okay, and with that, I will ask the applicant team to come and give us a presentation.
Chairman Birch, Chairman Chazo, and the rest of the members, my name is Richard Derringer, but you all know that by now. Met many times. This is a project that has been approved, and in fact, we're in the process of doing working drawings right now to build 3 of the 4 buildings. There's building A, B, and D. And we anticipate by the spring of next year that the staff will, or the building department will have those 3 of the 4 buildings ready for to start construction. We're here because we ran into a technical problem and we're trying to resolve this. We're not changing the project. The elevations are going to stay the same for building A, B, C, and I'll go, A, B, D, and I'll go over C in a minute. We're not trying to change any of that. It's going to continue to move forward on this. The problem we ran into is that, and we knew this prior to the last, before we were approved and brought this issue up, that the 25,000 square feet of commercial in the building is legal non-conforming, and it doesn't meet the zoning. And we can convert some of that to a commercial, being neighborhood serving or building serving, but most of it is legal non-conforming and has to go to residential. We could not go to residential back in January or May because we were limited at that time to the 35% density bonus. However, back in November of 2016, the state of California changed the law and density bonus, and has now allowed up to 100% instead of 35%. We've already notified the city in our belief that we can move forward on the state law now, but we agree with the city that they're redoing their laws, their legislation, to conform to what the state law is. Now, I don't know what that's going to look like. They may want more affordable. They may want less than 100%. You know, there are options that the city's going to come up with. What we do know, there's going to be a change, and we believe that'll give us the opportunity of converting what is legal non-conforming commercial into residential. So what we've done is we're submitting a modification on building C, and building C only. We're changing nothing else on the other buildings, on elevations. It's the same project. Building C, what we're doing is that, if you recall, there were 15 residential units approved and 25,000 approximately of commercial. We've changed it, and it's in your packet, to a different number, and Kevin's going to speak about all this. But we've changed it to readdress the housing issues by increasing housing not to 100%, but we're asking for 75%. Now, the city may say that's within their purview once they finish their legislation, which is supposed to be done within the next couple of months. Once that happens, then we want to change, be ready for it, and have these additional housing units to create density, which also increases affordability and creates what we think is a better design building. The only design changes that you will see when we go, or the architect goes over this, is the fact that in the prior hearing before this group, and in fact, before the Cultural Heritage Board, we had shown a picture, but we hadn't finalized how we were going to do it, on how we were going to raise the parapet from one end of the project to the other. We said we were doing it, and we showed it on a drawing, but we're now codifying it now. We're clarifying it. This is what we're doing. We're basically bringing the building back to what it looked like in 1875 when it was built. And so one of the drawings you'll notice in the package is a before and after, what it looked like in 1875 and what we're proposing for the building. Now, this only affects this one section on Donahue Street on the right side where the parapet fell down back in 1906 and was never rebuilt. We're just going to rebuild it to be consistent with all of the parapet. And the new drawing on that shows it. The other thing we've done is we have put residential, but we stepped the residential back further, another, I believe, 5 to 10 feet, so that you do not see anything in the residential whatsoever. You won't see it in the historic building. And we have a picture of that shown across the street at Street View, which is the same picture that the Design Review of Cultural looked at on all of the project originally. So from across the street, and in fact, almost all the way back until Prince Street, you can't see the fourth floor at all, which is better than what we originally got approved, because under what was approved, you had a reduced height that was equivalent to 10 feet. By going up and putting the parapet, you filled in that 10 feet, and you're now at a 35-foot height, which is consistent with all the way across. It's 35 feet for 3/4 right now of that part of the building. We just want to run it all the way through. And I think Kevin can explain that. There is more housing coming into this, but it has, because it is housing and it's replacing a substantial amount of commercial, the parking that we're providing on this it's no different. In other words, the commercial parking was 3 times higher than the residential. So actually, we're producing not only enough parking for all of the residential, but we're also providing 10 additional spaces above that in case anybody thinks we need more space. We don't need it, it's not required, but we're adding it. We also took the parking from the outside parking lot and pulled it off and put it inside the building so that we could create a swimming pool recreation facility for not only the project, but for the neighborhood. And you'll see that on the drawings. So that's what we're doing. We're not trying to start from scratch, because we hope by the time this goes into application and hopefully approved, we may have 2 or 3 buildings finished. Because that's the goal everybody wants, is to get into construction. But that's where we are right now. I know there's a limbo stage here, because a lot of this is new legislation and new rules. So we're all going to have to work through it, and that's what staff is working with us on, how to accomplish an overall goal to benefit the city and the neighborhood and the community, and eliminate a problem we have, which is our lenders are having a difficult time having a legal non-conforming commercial portion, which they can't finance, which is sitting right next to a bunch of affordable housing units in our project. So that's what got us there, and that's what we're trying to eliminate. And we've had a lot of cooperation from the city, and we're very proud that they're willing to work with us. I'll turn it over to Kevin. He can answer any other design issues.
Great, thank you.
Okay, members, he touched on some of the things, but I'll just give a quick overview of the changes, much like you had described. That's really how my presentation is geared today. Let's see. This picture, actually this is good, jumps right into what Rick was describing. On the bottom photo, should be the second page, I think, of the drawings. There's a small portion of the building that the parapet had not been repaired, that had fallen down in the 1906 earthquake. And that's what Rick was describing, wanting to take that up to the same parapet height that's on the remaining 3/4 of the building that fronts Donahue to the north side. And we adjusted slightly the detailing on that parapet to more closely match, going back one, what's you can see in this image, where the columns elements read through and go up into the parapet, and then there's a little small cornice line across the top. You can kind of see that element brought into this parapet here, the detailing. So big picture changes, as Rick described, working with the state's 100% increase on density bonus. We've got about 75% here. We've added a total of 55 units to the project. I'll go over, there's 44 of them are in this building, Building C, with the redesign. 11 of them are in Building D, but there's no exterior changes. There was some units on the ground floor that went to the second floor. They were townhouses, and we're looking at making just ground floor studio or first floor units and leaving the second level that fronts Donahue as 1 bedrooms. So there's no exterior changes, but we did create 11 units that way. So the project goes from 185 units to 240. There is an increase from the previous approval of about 10 total parking spaces in this project, with, again, the reduction in commercial but increase in residential. And then, as Rick described, there's no changes to buildings, exterior changes at all to buildings A, B, or D. Let's see. I'm going to skip forward here to the site. Okay, this is the new, do you have a slide of the old and the new site?
There's one in the information.
Okay, well, this is good enough. So what Rick described was we had a surface parking lot between, kind of nestled between buildings C, B, and A. We removed that and internalized it into the building so that we can create outdoor amenity space for the residents. And also because a lot of that back portion of the historic building, when it comes to retail or commercial uses, it gets kind of difficult, not only from a marketability standpoint, but from life safety and exiting. Yes?
Please review one more time which building is A. They're not labeled.
Okay, so the the right side of the drawing, the topmost building is building B, the smaller existing brick one, and the building that's all new construction is the building A that fronts Donahue at the southwest corner there. That makes sense? The left of that is, well, all the way to the left, the gray area, all the way up to 9th Street on the left side of the drawing, that's building D. So building C was the piece kind of in the middle, mostly in the historic winery building. And in the first proposal, we had about 15 units just on the very south side of that building, and the rest remained commercial. So in this instance, we're removing about 10,000 or so square feet of commercial space that's in building C, replacing with some parking in the back, and then adding housing above. So the site change, there's no change to the on-street parking. Those 42 stalls that are on street, we're not making any changes there or any changes to the driveway. The only site change is on-site, getting rid of that surface parking lot and internalizing it to the building. Yes.
Could you show us how you're internalizing it to the building? Is it going on the ground floor? I ask that question because the picture that includes the swimming pool, where there used to be a parking lot in the plans, says that's the first floor, and I'm not seeing how you're internalizing it.
Okay, yeah, the first floor in this case is the same as the site level. Site plan is the same as the first floor. So the parking is on the first floor,
Yes.
ground level.
And so are you putting the swimming pool above the parking?
No.
I'm sorry, that's why I'm asking the
Okay,
question.
let me clarify. It was a surface at-grade parking lot that was to the exterior of the building. We're removing that parking lot and putting the pool there at grade, if that makes sense. The parking then moves to the inside of the building, but still on the ground level.
And where on the inside of the building?
At the back of the building right there, with the white in the middle, there's kind of an L shape of parking stalls.
So that's the replacement of the gym that was planned?
Correct.
Got it.
Correct.
Thank
Yes.
you.
Yes. We continued the pattern of parking we had in Building D and extended into the back of this building where the commercial space used to be.
That's the graphic that she's
Yeah.
referring to, and we can put it on
Let's
here.
do that.
Karen, do you know how to switch to? I have no idea. We're going to find out. There we go. Where's the power?
don't know. This graphic's a little blurry, but this is a comparison to the top of this image is the original approved project. So on the right side of it, you can see the surface parking lot. There's, I think it was about 13 stalls in there. And that's the parking that we removed. And then the bottom image is what we're showing on the revisions, which is a pool area, outdoor amenity area, removing the parking and moving it to the inside of the building. And the upper image shows all the gym space. And there was some internal parking on the south side of the building that was below the housing in the previous approval. And we're just reconfiguring that parking across the back and making moving the retail more towards the front.
This document is in your packet. If you wanted to click on it, I think it's attachment 3A, project plans.
Can we switch back to the PowerPoint? Perfect. Okay, second floor, on the image on the right here was the original, is the approved project, and the grayed out area was the space that was it's a two-story volume, it's very tall buildings, about, I think they're about 30 feet inside space, so they're high open spaces on the inside. That was the gym space, and then the units that are shown on the right side of that image, which is the south side of the building, are the ones that are being reconfigured to what's shown on the left image up here. So we went from, I think it says 8 units on that second level to 21, basically taking a layout that's similar to what we did in Building D, where we create a podium level on the second floor and have open space in the middle that the units open to, and then that space will connect to the open space we have in Building D to the north. Third level, again, we have on the right the approved project. The grayed out area was the commercial space. We had, in this case, 7 townhouse units on between the third and fourth floor on the south side of the building. And then on the left side of this image is what we're proposing, which is 21 units with open space between the 2 rows of units, much like we've done in Building D. These units are accessed from the podium through stairs that enter the units and go up. So we have balconies. There's no walkways again here on this level. There's just balconies for those units to open to the interior, and they sit at least 15 feet back from the existing brick walls of the historic building. And then on the fourth floor, very similar. On the right side, again, was more the roof structures of the existing buildings and previously approved project. You'll notice on the left side of that image was the roof garden from Building D, and then the south side of that image was the upper floors of those townhouse units. On the left side of this sheet is the proposed, again, similar to what we did on Building D, where we have 17 units now, and we incorporate that with the roof garden to the north. So they interface to the roof garden, and we use kind of the bridge approach for circulation between the sides, so that we have openings that allow light and air down to the third and second level at the podium. Those big openings in the center.
Quick
Yes.
question. Is that elevator shared between C and D?
The one on the left side of the image, yes.
The north side of C? Okay.
Yes, that was the one that was previously in the project. Then we also added one to the south in Building C there,
Okay.
or we relocated it. There was, I'll go back one, let's see. to the third floor. On the right side of the image, down in the would be the southwest corner, bottom right, was a stair and elevator there, and we just relocated it more towards the middle of that facade on the south side. Let's see, this was just an image showing from Donahue looking at the west elevation. So again, you're seeing the better detailing on the parapet, showing the columns going all the way up, so it looks and mimics more the historical photo that's at the bottom. These are just some aerial views. I think that was it. That's the overview.
Okay, with that, what I'd like to do is, Kevin, we can just probably keep you here.
Sure.
Start with questions from the boards for the applicant. Oh, public comment. We're going to take public comment on this item. If there's anyone from the public who wishes to speak on this item, please state your name and you'll have your 3 minutes. You can work from up there, you bet.
Am I on? Yes, I am. Okay, I have a couple of questions in regards to what I'm seeing or not seeing on these layouts. So I may be in error in some of my comments and I may not. I really don't see much accessibility for handicapped people. Those two elevators that are quoted seem to be quite a distance, and for anyone who is living there, I think it'd be almost impossible if you're handicapped to be able to live in those apartments. I also do see a major division between affordable housing and, quote, regular housing. And then I'm also looking at, I think it was, is it attachment 3C? Yes. Am I correct in that there are residences in Building C? And if so, do they only get their light from the center? There's no windows. There's no, I mean, I don't know where there's light for any of these these residents. And that would be approximately the comments I have at this point.
Thank you. Thank you very much. All right, questions from the board to the applicant. We can start with cultural heritage.
Okay, yes. Let's start out with, well, by saying that, you know, our purview is the exterior of the building, and there's not a whole lot of changes on the exterior. With that said, reconstructing a parapet is a pretty big deal to us. We love the concept, but there are a lot of issues that go along with reconstructing something that has been lost. Question is, did you have any sort of original drawings or anything to base your design on for the parapet?
Yeah, we don't have any original drawings, but we have photographs that we're looking at, both of the back of the building that faces the rail tracks, which is an existing condition, and the one image, we have other images, but this was the one we brought tonight. Oops, back up. There, that's the front, that's Donahue, the Donahue facade there.
Okay, one of the reasons I'm asking is, of course, that if you're going to reconstruct anything, the definition of reconstructing something is very narrow. You have to know exactly what you're reconstructing and how they put it together. Second of all, the proportions between the, I'm trying to phrase this as a question. The parapet in the original photo seems substantially higher above that belt line than the new. Could you comment on that, please?
Yeah, the original, well, the one that we're seeing in this photo is definitely taller than what exists now. On that bottom image on the left side. That's what we're just trying to match the height on that very south portion of the facade. So it's definitely shorter than what was there. I think if I go back and look at that image, it looks like the roof construction was different than currently exists, because it looks like those roofs may have come all the way out to that parapet and died into the parapet, where now it's more of a truss configuration that comes lower into that parapet, doesn't come at the full height and just come right to the edge, that steps down as it comes to the outside. So I don't think that taller parapet in the way it's currently constructed is needed, but it probably was needed in this case.
Next question related to the parapet is the shadow lines indicate that the pilasters are much deeper on it, so the wall surface itself is set back. Is that correct?
Yeah, I'm not sure I have to go back and look at what the dimension is, but we're not changing the depth of those columns from what currently exists.
Right. The column looks like it's flush, but the parapet wall seems to be pulled back. I just wanted to clarify if that's really what was intended or not.
At the top, if it's, I see what you're talking about, that the
wall
parapet,
planes aren't
well,
flush with
the
each other.
existing condition of that parapet does slightly step back from the primary face of the wall.
Right.
I don't know that exact dimension, but that is the condition that exists there right now.
Okay. Then the new one appears to be pulled back further. Was that?
We're not pulling it back further.
Okay.
No.
All right. Was there any, last question related to the parapet. When you're reconstructing an element and you can't guarantee it's exact, was any thought given to differentiating it from the existing work?
Yeah, but we were trying to add a level of some detail basically back into that parapet that doesn't currently exist, to make it look more similar to what's existing, rather than go the other direction, because most of that parapet currently exists. Rather than change all of it and go a completely different direction, we decided to keep it the same direction that is there, but add a little level of detail that more mimics or is closer to what is represented in those images we've seen.
Okay. Thank you. That was my questions.
I don't have any questions.
Okay.
Those were my questions as well, so we'll let you off.
Okay, I have one really important question. Do you have any current photos that you can put up of this facade? That way we could... Yeah.
Current ones.
Yeah. Well, I think we talked about that before. I think you did take some from the street view.
I don't know if I have them here today. Even, let me look through.
So that can really help with giving you some guidance in regards to what direction to go with that parapet. Yes, and go ahead, Mark. Well, while you're looking for that,
All right.
Mark has another question.
I'll add one more question. Is there, we're glad to see windows coming back into some of those formerly bricked up openings. Was there any information about what those new windows will be?
Like in this facade, you mean, the openings?
correct.
They're not windows, they're just openings.
Those are just openings?
Yes, no windows in them.
Okay, thank you for clarifying.
Yeah. I don't see that I have any existing photos here today.
And then I didn't know if we could get on Google Earth or anything on, or Street View on our iPads,
Right.
because I was gonna, no. But that might be something that would be great to have.
I believe that you can get Street View through our GIS, but probably something that we would need to show you after this
Okay,
meeting.
yeah, and then we can use it next time.
Yeah.
So I think that question, and I think that's what we're all looking at, is obviously the current condition that it's in. So we want to see the photos of the current condition. And then based on that, what you can build up from that. So clearly, you know, as my question would be or my request would be to, do you have something you can show maybe on the, would it show up on the screen?
I don't know how it works, but this is the picture I sent to the city. Let me just give you my phone, you can see it closer.
Oh, you could pass it around.
Yeah.
That'd be great. You can start with Mark, if you don't mind.
Okay.
That'd be great.
This is what's there now, including the parapet. You want to just ask her?
Do you know how many, while they're looking at that, do you know how far, you're saying that the parapet steps back a little bit off that? There's like a ledge?
Yes.
3 inches.
Interesting. Yeah, it's hard to tell from, obviously, historic photos are sometimes
Right.
really hard to decipher.
And we obviously can come back with more detail on that, but it does definitely step back from the
Yeah,
primary
so-
wall facade.
Okay.
Yep.
And then the brick that's there is the original brick and
Yes.
mortar? And then you're proposing what type of brick for the building up of the parapet?
Proposing to match the brick.
Yeah, it looks like they just removed that one whole, you know, it's too tall, and took down the building, right?
Yep.
Okay. There you go.
What originally must have happened was in 1906 when it collapsed. And they rebuilt it. They rebuilt it a couple inches back. The wall is a foot and a half of brick and then 6 inches of concrete
Right,
behind that.
right.
They put it back, and I'm assuming for safety purposes, maybe they set it back 3 inches. I don't think it was ever 3 inches set
No,
back.
right.
Because if you look at the original pictures, and if you look at the back of the building, which we have pictures of the original back, it goes straight up. And in fact, in the back of the building, I think the columns are the same way as what we're projecting, straight all the way up.
Was there
What-
any bracing behind in that photo from the rear of the parapet?
What
Did you
was
see
there?
any sort of bracing of the parapet? 'Cause it
Jump
seems
in,
so
and
high.
I'm going to give Bill a second to comment. Bill?
I just wanted to mention one thing, just as a matter of procedure tonight. I know we've got the iPads, and I just want to make sure we're all looking at the same stuff. So I'd say if we can just stay focused on the PowerPoint, the phone is being passed along to everyone, so that's fine. And then just one other reminder, we can't have individual conversations as we're
Yeah.
as we're going through.
We're just going to say, we're going
Great,
to...
thanks, Bill.
When we come back, we're going to supply a much more detailed picture of how it's going to be braced. The engineers will do their study, and then Susan Clark will give her opinion.
And
So
then
you won't be...
what's the height of the new parapet? Did you?
Parapet's almost 5 feet. It's 4 foot,
Okay.
8 or 10
For the new,
for the parapet.
for the
that-
addition?
Yeah.
Okay.
And the parapet at the end, as you see, dropped down, so it's 4. So when you look at what we originally approved, you actually see the 4th floor because your building dropped down to the point where it's under 30 feet. Now, when we're done, everything's going to be 35 feet tall. And the building behind it, which is sitting back 20 feet, will be 40 feet. You won't see it. Just like if you looked at the roof line that's there now, because if you looked at my phone, you'll notice you don't see the roof line. Go back to Prince Street, and you'll see that the roof line actually goes up 45 feet. And in fact, the approval that was done in 2009 states that that part of the building is 45 feet tall.
Okay, and then
But you can't see that.
The brick, that's great. I appreciate all the detail. And then the brick, we were talking about, you're going to be looking for, your goal is to look for a replacement brick that's similar. And were you planning on having that custom made, or were you thinking that there might be something, because I believe the size of new brick is slightly larger than original brick. So I just was going to ask you how you were going to address that, what you were thinking in color. And I think Mark
Well,
might also have a question that might relate
Right,
to
we've
that.
already found that, I think about 1,000 pieces in storage that we're using now. If you go out there and look at what we're doing, we're repointing, and we're fixing the brick under a permit. We're replacing a whole lot of the brick with permission of the city. But it's interesting is the neighbors are trying to convince us not to paint it. Now, we haven't brought that back into an issue because originally we said we were going to. but it looks very nice without painting it. And we're finding brick. Old brick is not actually that hard. New brick's impossible because it's the wrong size. So we've had no problem finding it so far. And we've got 1,000 pieces so far available in storage.
And you're just matching the original mortar in the mix?
Well, the mortar mix is done by the city, who's engineered, because it has to be done under a certain load factor. So the city and our engineers together, you work out how that works. They've approved that.
Because I think that, and we can clarify this with the city, because I think that's part of our purview, is the color of the mortar.
Well, the mortar's staying the same
and
as what was there before.
Okay.
But the strength of the mortar, we're using regular mortar mix, brick mortar mix, but I think they're mixing some other things to give it strength.
But you're pointing the same, and the colors is similar.
Yeah, and since we stripped the paint off, it's really more noticeable now than ever. So it's really important to continue the coloring of what was there before.
Okay, great. And Mark, you had another question?
Forgive me, one last question. This would be pertinent to the view, page 6, building C3D images that you had up there a moment ago. On the approved existing building, it shows a variety of existing parapet cap heights that were played out and composed. On the proposed, those appear to be demolished off and a uniform cap placed. Could you clarify what's happening there, please?
Yeah, that's the section that we're trying to bring up to match the existing parapet height so that it more closely mimics those historical photos, that small section.
So we're moving historical elements in order to put in something that, was any consideration been given to just to simply extend it up using the existing heights?
Oh, to extend up and leave the little cornice detail, but extend it up?
there,
Yeah, we could look at doing that.
Okay.
Yes.
That was my question.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, please, Scott.
Kevin, on that same page 6, maybe I'm thoroughly confused already, but it appears that the proposed revision is actually what was approved and on that detail, and so the top one is what was approved, but it says proposed, and the bottom one is what is proposed. Am I wrong?
Yeah, the bottom one is the approved version,
So that
currently approved project.
that carried the parapet as it is right now, and you're just raising the front parapet and not taking it all the way down.
Correct. Correct.
It looks like the roof lines are, so you're changing then the roof lines on the building because we're raising up to a 4th level of
Well, yeah, the roof's
living
gone. The
units.
roof's gone.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
10-4.
Yep.
All right, Drew.
Okay, I have a couple questions. This one actually may be more for staff, and because I wasn't here for the original one. And it's a zoning question, but I was looking at the parking requirements that are on the project plans. Was there a special parking requirement given for this because it's a transit-oriented development and all that? I just want to clarify that.
The original approval included a density bonus, and because they designated a certain number, I think it was 15 units or 11% for very low income occupancy, they were entitled to a 35% density increase and 2 concessions. One of those concessions related to parking, although we did find that they met the parking requirements by calling in the parking as a concession. Decision makers were not able to require additional parking. And they met the parking requirements because of the state's density bonus ordinance, a previously approved conditional use permit for reduced parking for the gym, and then the standard parking for the additional commercial space.
Yeah, I guess I'm just wondering the difference between the and then I'm wondering about the approved calculation that shows half a parking space for 1 bedrooms, 1 parking space for 2 bedrooms, doesn't factor in the zoning requirement for visitor spaces, and then at the proposed one, they've shifted to the 1 bedrooms only being a half of parking and the 2 bedrooms being a half a parking space. Is
So
that part of that too?
The staff hasn't analyzed
Oh, they
any
have-
of
you guys
this
haven't looked at that.
proposed
Okay, cool,
change,
cool.
so in terms of the parking, but you are correct that the state's density bonus ordinance at the time, I don't know if that's changed, required, due to the proximity of the development to the train station, it required at what was it, one space
Yeah,
per?
half a parking space per bedroom. Yeah, because of the proximity to transit, you're allowed to do half a space per bedroom, and we use the same formula in the current
Okay,
proposal.
I just wanted clarification on
Yes.
that, because I noticed that it's different on what was approved and then what was proposed, and I know you guys haven't looked at it yet, but I wanted to still clarify it.
The ratios should be the same on what was approved and what's being proposed should be the same parking ratio, half a parking space per bedroom.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah. The parking goes down overall because we reduce commercial, which has a higher ratio.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay. So the next question I have is about the exterior elevations. So what I'm reading is that the existing openings where indicated on that brick shell, you're removing any plywood or brick or whatever may be in there, and that's the only exterior openings on that entire exterior brick shell, and then you're relying on your patio space and the setback to your building to provide your natural light
Correct.
into the space. Okay, so really this brick shell is just that, it's a shell where everything else is kind of self-contained
Within it.
okay.
And we step the units back on the east side and the west side so that they have natural air and light, and then keep an opening in the middle so that also the other sides, both sides of the units get natural air and light.
Yeah. It's a little hard to read, but it's better. On your large axon, it reads much better in terms of what you're doing in that regard. It's hard to read it from the elevation standpoint, but your large axons are really, it makes it apparent what's kind of going on, what you're doing in that regard. And then my last question was, on the previous approved buildings, you appear to have incorporated brick and some other materials, but you've kind of abandoned brick and other materials on the infill component of this building. Any particular reason why? I mean, it's really reading to me like very flat and blank, and I'm just curious why that decision was made.
Well, they still have all the kind of stepping in and out elements to the facade, so they're kind of they're animated, but we didn't want to use brick on those interior buildings because they're much closer to the historic brick building, and we don't want them to start competing with each other.
I was maybe just another material, I guess.
Yeah, we use the brick more on the new portion of the project, the new buildings to the north side of the site.
Right, which would be, yeah, okay, yeah.
And the elements on building A to the south side that fronts Donahue.
Okay.
If they're internal, we don't bother putting the brick on them because we'd rather you be looking at the real brick of the historic walls.
Sure. I think that's all my questions for now.
Great. Sabra?
I just had one question back to that wonderful image on page 6. The current version shows a chimney, which is in the original building. That chimney doesn't show above the parapet in the proposed version, and I have no way to tell if the chimney is still there.
Yeah, we're proposing to get rid of it.
Okay?
We can't, it doesn't really show up in the historic photographs. We don't know, I don't know what point it was. Yeah.
Could you come and use the microphone? I know it's really inconvenient, but it lets the people who watch this hear you.
We don't know when it was added, but it was after 1906 that the fireplace was added. It's actually still there, but it's not operable. It was filled in with concrete. So you had a concrete thing sitting there going straight up. Because it's not part of the original building, and remember we discussed this with Cultural Heritage Board when we went through the first hearing?
Yeah, I'm new too, so you
Right.
just have to forgive me.
It was my understanding is that we were going to take that off because it's not part of the original design of the building. But if it's meant to stay, we can keep it there, we can take it away. It's a non-operable piece of square. The problem's going to be is when you take the roof off, now you're going to have to put a parapet extension for the fireplace, which is even going to be higher, which is going to make that structural thing behind that fireplace stick out. And it doesn't make sense to us to keep it there. And the engineer said we should just take it off. It was just added sometime. Could have been added in the 40s or 50s or 60s, but it's not part of the original.
Thank you.
Well, while you're here, and I apologize if I was playing with my new toy when this was covered, can you, with the new residential configuration, the fourth floor units, can you keep the existing stepped end of that facade, or is there a reason that the parapet has to be extended all the way around? I'm just curious.
Well, we originally showed it with it going around in the hearing, and we said in the hearing we were going to extend it. And that's what Cultural Heritage and Design Review said that was fine. And we have that picture that was submitted in that other hearing that showed that. But it was it's not a 3D rendering like the ones we usually use at the end. The concern I had, and the reason I said we were going to rebuild it around, is because if you don't do that, you're dropping that side of the building down 5 more feet, and so your 4th floor now is seen. And by bringing the parapet all the way across, you don't see the 4th floor at all. You don't see anything behind it. And I don't want to go back, because you guys will yell at me on this, to 2009, but that's what we did in 2009. We put the buildings, all the housing within the brick building, and we raised the parapet up so that you didn't see any of the buildings within. But that's, again, not part of what you're looking at.
Great, thank you. Didn't mean to jump your question time there. Okay. Great. Scott?
I don't have any questions.
I'm curious, how is the community going to access the pool, the broader community? Is that going to be a pool that's operated by someone? You mentioned that it was not just for the residents?
Well, we're very close with the local community and work with the association already. In fact, that's why the gym was a nonprofit kind of thing. But what we're planning to do is, it's mainly for the people that are in the building. But we want to have an ability to let the neighbors use it. Now, we may have to, we're not sure, have to segregate it into different time schedules, like neighbors could come at this hour or that. I actually want to meet with the association as to find out what it is, because the pool is big enough to accommodate a whole lot of people. It's not a little pool. The reason we pulled it outside, and if you look at the size of it, it's almost, it will be the size pretty close to almost an Olympic pool. And we want to not just have the pool there, but we're going to probably have to design and submit to both of you for review a clubhouse and everything else that would be part of that, and how you would ingress and egress through the entrances and that. So we have to do that anyhow on a separate application, I believe. I mean, that's up to staff how they want it.
Well, I'd imagine it'll be part of the public hearing, part of the preliminary design review. So,
yeah, we can have it ready by then, and we'll
Great.
have it all designed out. We didn't actually want to get that far down because we had to make sure you're comfortable with what we're trying to do.
Sure. Okay, thank you. I'm trying to stick within my own guidelines here. I'll take a stab. Pre-app meeting, anything going on yet? Fire, any other issues? What are you learning so far from fire if you're in for building permits on the other buildings?
Same issues, that they have to have access, we have to deal with exiting.
Okay.
They didn't have anything special other than what we've heard before.
Okay. With that, I will close up the questions from the boards. And I think that what we need really at this point is we need some good input, some little 5-minute stump speeches from each member about what we'd like to see in a public hearing. So we're going to bring this back to the board.
May I ask, did you want me to address the community? Is that what you said? You wanted me to address the community questions or not?
No, I think we'll probably embed some of those same questions in our
That's fine.
in our comments, and I think that those questions are well noted. In fact, they stole some of my thunder. So we'll get this information out to you guys for what's in the next, for what we need to see in the next hearing.
Right. Just wanted to mention that the 11 units on Building D that we're adding, they're all handicapped. Because what we found is a lot of the veterans and elderly want ground floor, no matter, even though there's an elevator, they want ground floor, go in, handicap.
Yeah.
I mean, we do this because we learned this from the commercial building. So we put 11 handicap units. All of them will be handicap accessible and made with specific equipment for handicapped people.
Great, thank you. Yeah, and we'll get to probably many of those comments. I think Kevin's probably warming up to take notes right now. So with that, we will jump to the Cultural Heritage Board for comments and direction to the applicant. And I'd like to keep this, I don't want this to be a dialogue. I'd like to give the applicant an opportunity to respond and ask a few questions at the end, but really what I'd like to do is get these comments and thoughts out there. So there we go.
Go ahead, Mark.
Thank you, Chair. Fairly limited comments. First of all, begin by saying I do like the proportion of the new parapet. I think it adds to the appearance of the building. That said, I guarantee we have some real heartburn in taking off historic detail. Those existing stepped cornices are a double cornice and have some design in them, and removing those in order to facilitate the other, not very keen on. You could still extend at that height, but leave the existing in place, perhaps, and differentiate the new work by not doing the same kind of detailing as you extend it up. Might be an approach you'd like to take. I've also noted subsequently that we're extending some changes to the existing cornice, extending down the south side of the building. And so my comments apply equally to the existing cornice, at least along the south side that I see, as you extend it up. Don't call it reconstruct. You're not. We don't have the original information of how it was built, exactly the proportions, everything how it's built. It isn't a reconstruction. It is a new fabrication to serve your purposes. And it should be differentiated from the original work in some way. I think that's what I've got. That's going to be the extent of my comments on the exterior changes.
It appears to me that what we've been talking about is a wall, in a sense. It represents something that was there before but really isn't there now, because the interior is going to be living spaces as opposed to a warehouse or whatever that was. And that what we're doing is we're trying to replicate what that facade looked like based upon this old photo of 1875. And my sense is that it reasonably replicates that. So I think that makes sense to do. Although it's not perfect, it's okay by me in terms of how you preserve the appearance of what was there before. So that would be my comment.
All right, well, not to belabor the point, couple of other things you might want to think about that just sort of help think about what's the difference between a reconstruction, which this is not, and an attempt to get close to the feel of the original building. But particularly in terms of the Secretary of the Interior's guidelines, you're not doing a reconstruction and you must differentiate. And so I think there's some room there to work with details like the cornices that Mark was talking about and things like that. Also, one of the things that's very clear about this building is that what we call the period of significance is, to use the technical term, freaky with this one, because you've got an original construction, you've got modifications that continue through the entire history of the building, the chimney being a good example. And so one way to think about that is that that is a design book of possible elements to think about that you could use, not just on the parapet, but in other aspects of the building, that, again, you're not trying to put sort of, oldie-looking stuff stuck on like glue, but in terms of getting at some of the things that Mark is talking about with how to build something new that goes. Think about that building as a catalog, not just the stuff that's diagnostically quote-unquote original, but everything that's there, because right now it all goes. So if you think about that aesthetically and as a design palette, if you will, remembering that you must make the parapet distinctive. You can't try to make it look original, or then you're in violation of the guidelines. Does that make sense? Okay.
Okay, I have a same kind of comments, but just I'm first going to start off with the request, just so we're clear. So what I would request the next time that we're here, after you're at a stage where you've turned in some drawings and we're at a sort of an action phase, is a request, for example, of materials. So if you can bring, if you have extra bricks, if you have those ones that you are filling in, that'd be great. Some up-close photos of the brick and the material and the mortar and things like that. That would be fantastic. And it is considered replacement brick. So as my colleagues, board members have noted, please don't use the word reconstruct. And then also photographs, so the exterior photographs again. And I would take current condition ones. Don't give us ones from 2 or 3 years ago. Give us the ones now, so that we can see all the great work that you're doing and doing that restoration there on the brick facade. And that's the west facing, right? Also, it is interesting, and just this is sort of a comment so you know, so when you're talking your dialogue and the period of significance can be a very large period, or it can be 2 or 3 different periods. So they're not just, sometimes it's 1 year, could be, 1889, could be 1889 to 1910, then also to, 1920 and 1950. So there's like these sections. But you have to, if you have several areas where you really sort of want to pick one that you're going towards, but there is that leeway, so you do have leeway. But clearly you're focusing on that look from the, is this 1889? There you go. So that'll be hard to do. So you want to be careful also, with your plans, you want to be careful those words that you use. So try to always use the words preserve, restore, reconstruct. If you're not doing that, you want to say that it's new, but that it is there's some continuity, but you've differentiated it. And there are many ways to differentiate. So you can do all sorts of things. You can do things differentiate. Obviously, we want you to put brick up there, but there's other ways of doing that. The stepping the parapet is fantastic. I would love the idea of you breaking that as a true parapet. So I would like to see the corner detail, but I'm also okay with the new. I like the new better than the one that's approved. I do like it better. I would like you to watch that south facade, but I think Mark already made that clear. So I would just really, understand that you do have a leeway of what you can do. But if you're trying to do a true parapet, really, and you're trying to get it look similar to it was, I think the step is a great idea. So, and the other thing is that you can reconstruct, but you can only reconstruct based on photographic or drawing evidence. So that is a part of what you can do on the National Register, but it would really be that you were bringing, like if you were bringing a whole building back and you didn't tear any of it down and you were trying to get it to look exactly as it did in the 1870s. And you would be using it as, in a way that it was used historically. So you'd have to hit all these things to really reconstruct it. So you really are rehabilitating in a way, but not fully. So, but I think you're on track here and actually like it better. So, and I don't think, and with the fireplace, I would just comment about that would be, I would make sure that in the updated Susan Clark document that is addressed. I believe it was addressed before, but I'm not remembering really. So just so that question gets answered, so that's just, she can define it as a character defining feature or not, or when it was put in, or just make sure it's in there. And then I think those are all the suggestions that I have. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Drew?
I would encourage you to up your resolution on your renderings. They're somewhat difficult to read. And so I think anything you can do to make your plans, elevations, renderings easier to read for us will make it easier to understand the intention of what you're trying to do. That's kind of a broad, overreaching comment regards to all of the documents. It was a little hard to read plans and some other things. But after, you look at them for a while, you really kind of understand what's going on. The other thing that I appreciate is I was looking through the design guidelines, and you have incorporated public space, open space, and I would like to see more definition of that in your preliminary package so we can understand exactly how that's going to work. I would like to see elevations of the buildings, and by that I mean, yes, the existing brick shell, but also an elevation just inside the brick shell so we can understand what's going on with the proposed apartment buildings. All four sides of every, not node of building to understand what's going on. And then I think something else that I think is not really working, and I brought it up in a question, but I'm going to give you as a comment now, is the mono-materiality of the buildings on the interior, I don't think work within either the design guidelines or the framing of the Department of the Interior standards for historic preservation work. And I really think you need to explore some different materials on these buildings, particularly because your other buildings are so varied, and these buildings are kind of monochromatic and pretty boring, for lack of a better word. And so I think beyond that, just a little bit more detail, more information about what's going on, and an exploration of materiality.
Great. Sabra?
Thank you, Drew. Because when these come back, I would like to understand how the retail works, how welcoming the entrances are. I can't see anything that indicates that on these particular drawings. Beyond just what's happening with the building, I'd like more context. I'd like to understand what the building looks like and how it works from the other side, from the smart train side, particularly since it appears to me that access to the swimming pool by the public would be from that side. I would like to know, and if that's not so, then entrances need to be clearly defined. I'd like to understand what's being done as a design element to attract people and direct them to the entrance to residential and the entrance to retail, which isn't in any of these pictures. Although we're only looking at building C and now building E is removed, I gather, I would appreciate knowing how the buildings work together more effectively, just in some context drawings, and how they work within the surrounding area. The round barn is a great image in one of these, but it has no context. It's just sitting there. So I agree that I'd like more detail. I don't have a particular issue with the parapet, but I know that one mechanism for defining and separating new from old is texture, is size of brick, but it's also, doing that is jarring. I saw one very effective addition of a parapet set off by a line that defined where the old parapet ended, and then resuming with new parapet material. It's certainly shifting the size of bricks, the color of bricks is visually disharmonizing, and I can understand your desire to match the bricks. So from my perspective, when we see this next, I want to understand how this project works better with these amendments. And I can't tell that. Thank you.
Scott?
I'll keep it brief, but I'll echo a couple things that have already been said, maybe in a different way, is that in looking at it and trying just to keep it to building C, it's rather difficult for me. So I would say I want to see all the buildings in their glory in the next package, even though if we're just talking about building C, that's fine. But like everybody's saying, it's contextually, it's hard to figure out what's really going on and how it plays off of the other buildings with what we have in this package. From a consistency standpoint, I also agree that when you have an approved and a proposed revision, keeping the perspective line and the renderings the same is important, because they're off right now, and so and the trees are bigger in one, or maybe it's just closer up in one, or what, it's hard to compare what was approved and what we are looking at. And it may not be in all the elevations, but just take a thorough look through that. What else was I going to talk about? From the perspective of the increased density, if it's allowable, then I think you really just have to look at livability and take an honest approach of, are people going to be able to live in these units and enjoy the experience of living in these units? Because we could increase the density, tenfold, because we can just make smaller units, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we should. And I think we get back to one of the overarching comments from way early on, is that we raise a parapet and then the daylight that gets down to those bottom units is diminished, and one person's patio above becomes that person's shadow below. And so I don't know if there's a way to sidestep each patio or do something creative in that regard rather than lose square footage. because I understand all the competing factors here, but again, kind of looking at the daylighting studies and really what the effect these people are going to have on that side of their living unit would be helpful. It might be helpful to take an overhead view of a 3D image and just kind of throw some dimensions on there for us to get a little more familiar with that. And then what's been commented on already, it looks like that now we have what we had a street before to parking, now we've got an exit from a garage out. And we've got that pool back there and how that all plays out with the fence and access to the pool for the residents. So, you know, I think, you know, I'm all in favor of more density, so let's try and do that, but a hard look at whether it makes sense to provide all the density that you can. If the project worked before financially and it's just a conforming issue, maybe less density, more livability. And again, I'm not saying that this doesn't work because I don't fully know yet, but I want to see more of how it does work.
Thank you, Scott. So same comments, really, last Sabra and Scott's comments. I'm having trouble understanding this out of context from the entire project. So there are site circulation issues, you know, there's not issues. Scott hit it, I don't know if there's issues. I'm kind of trying to go back to an old set of drawings I kept in my files, and I popped those open while I reviewed the project. So we really need a good idea of how the changes impact the existing approved pieces, how they improve them, we hope. So we're going to need, from my end, you know, I'll need the diagrams, or I'll need the tables to include the square footage per types of unit. I am really hung up on, and if you remember from my comments before, I've got a question for staff I'll follow this with, where the affordable units are, what the size of the affordable units is relative to the market rate units, and accessibility and the mix of accessibility and affordability. I'm going to ask staff, I work with applications as part of the applicant team in other places, and I don't know if they're local ordinances or not, but I know that one of the things that I see all the time now is I see scattered diagrams, plans that show the affordable units spread throughout the project, plans that really diagram. So I don't know if there are code issues at a state level or a local issue, but I do think that that's something that I'm seeing a lot of, and I would like to understand from staff's perspective, were this to come back. Just even, you know, I got the same heartburn when I looked at this diagram and I see the 4 small units crammed into one corner of building A as the affordable units. I don't know that that fits the spirit of the affordable, and if the affordable is being used in part to increase the density and increase the financial viability of the project, I want to see the affordable used the right way. So that's something that I would like to really take a look at. And accessible, affordable, that relationship, because if you're going to start down this road, you do it right. And the other comment that I had was, I think that I still end up back at that relationship between some of the civil engineering and the design of the project, just because I find it I know that building C has got a significant grade change. We don't need to talk about it today. I know that there's a lot going on. So there's going to be a whole lot of dirt, if I'm not mistaken, that has to come out, and then you got to structurally build back up for units on top. It's a big change, and while we're in the process of tying together the livability, circulation, all these other pieces, I'd love to get some sections that show us how you're going to pull off this really wonderful sort of delicate dance in the middle here, so that we can really understand it fully as we evaluate the project. So I'm glad that, especially with the Cultural Heritage Board, it seems like some of these changes to Building C are probably positive, and I think that we've got maybe a project that has a little better, it talks to the street a little better, but there's a whole bunch of details. I'm going to remind you guys about color boards and elevations of the interior corridors, and probably for all of us, remembering what the interior spaces and those elevations are on Building D, and seeing that, even if it's just, so that we can relate it to Building C and see where they connect, it's going to be important. So the more information, the better. And I'll look forward to seeing this back as a preliminary hearing. So with that, I don't know if you guys have any questions. I want to make sure you get the full benefit of the time you're spending with us in concept here.
I don't think I have any questions.
Okay.
I think we got what it was. Just the direction, the concept was good, and we know we're going to come back with a lot more detail.
Great. Super. So with that, we will move on from item 6.1. I think we have one more item on the agenda, which is to provide comment on the draft minutes from our previous joint meeting, which was the M Group discussion regarding process improvement action plan. Did anyone have comments after reviewing those minutes? I've got one.
No, just one is the misspelling of my name. So, Debacker with a capital B, please.
Okay. And Drew, we haven't known each other that long. Are you Robert in a different format, or are you Drew? You're both. Okay, so we'll go with Robert. Perfect.
Robert is my first name, Drew is my middle name. I go by my middle name. Either works, it's fine.
Perfect. I noticed that. I'm like, who's this Robert? So with that, I believe we have no further business today. Is there a department report or? Okay. So we will adjourn. Thank you.